but I do love to know where people are from. Patricia, so thanks for asking that question.
Oh,
Kathleen's
yeah.
from Rochester, New York.
Good morning. I live in Victoria on South Vancouver Island in the province of British Columbia in Canada. So we're just a short boat ride from the shores of Seattle and Port Angeles. So we share the Pacific Northwest with Northern California, Washington State, Vancouver Island.
So beautiful up there. So beautiful.
That Bill speaking.
Yes.
Bill, if it's okay, if after this class, could we all come up and visit you?
Yes,
Absolutely.
please.
Welcome, Dan and Greta. If any of y'all want to let us know where you're from, you're welcome to. We're going to get started in just a minute.
Hello, I'm from North Little Rock, Arkansas.
Excellent.
Hello, I'm from West Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
Excellent. Welcome. Thank you. And Danya, since you are our fearless leader and organizer of this whole thing, whenever you're ready to start, just you can begin with your welcome.
Beautiful. Thank you, Patricia. Thank you. And for sure, welcome everyone. It's so nice to see everyone popping in and hearing where you're all from. I will just ask maybe if everyone could just take a minute to open up your chat box because you're going to need it throughout our class today. And I'll just be popping some things in the chat here as I go. But I just really would like to first just invite everyone to place your feet on the floor and maybe take a nice sigh or a deep breath to just signal to yourself that we're here and let go of maybe whatever your day has held so far. As Patricia mentioned, my name is Danya Sutherland Baker, and I have the honor of being in service here at Bethlehem Center as the executive director. And Bethlehem is located also on Vancouver Island on Westwood Lake. And we acknowledge that we're actually gathered on the territory of the Sinam First Nation. And we just recognize the stewardship of this land throughout the ages, and it's such an honor to be able to work and play and do our spiritual practice here on this sacred land. So I'll invite each of you, if you know the territory where you're from, to pop it in the chat, and maybe with your name if you haven't already shared with the group where you're from. Let's take a minute to do that now. As Patricia said, it was neat to see that we're coming from all corners. It's quite lovely. And someone from Hope, Florida, Delaware. Beautiful. Quite a few from Tina, you're joining quite a few from Little Rock today. Wonderful. Jeremy also from North Carolina. And a few from Vancouver Island. Michigan. Fantastic. Vernon, British Columbia. Alice. Fantastic. Well, I will say that Bethlehem Center is absolutely delighted to be able to host this interfaith series, Poetry for the Journey. On behalf of our board and myself, again, thank you for joining today. It's so great to see such a fulsome group here. And we're exceptionally grateful to our teachers that you're going to meet over the coming days, or coming weeks, I should say. If it weren't for them, this and their commitment to interspiritual exploration, we wouldn't be on this journey together. So thanks to each of you. I'll just put their names, as you will see on our landing page. You can learn more about them, but here's who's going to be guiding us over the coming weeks. And this series is actually possible because of our sponsors. And I just wanted to share a little bit about them with you today. So we have 4 sponsors, or 3 sponsors, pardon. And one of those is the Cobb Institute. And the Cobb Institute has a purpose to promote the exploration of process theology and also its application in everyday life. So it's great that we're kicking off with Jay today, because he has a beautiful gift of sharing that in our everyday. Also, Process and Faith is another one of our sponsors. And they're all about the exploration in a fundamental of the process theology, spirituality, and religion. And I'll pop in the chat here each of their websites in a moment. And then, of course, the Interfaith Center of Arkansas, who really are aiming to promote the interfaith harmony and build bridges of peace and understanding among people of different religions, backgrounds, dialogue, and education. You know, what wonderful missions to have in these days to bring us together in such a way. I'll just pop that in the chat for you. There you go. So our hope over the coming weeks is this experience, that it's rich for each of you individually and, of course, rich collectively as well. And at this point, I'd like to hand it back to Patricia, who's going to guide us through what you can expect over the coming weeks and how to make the most of the experience. Again, thank you, everyone, and I'll look forward to being with you. Patricia?
Thank you, Donya, for that centering kind of introduction. I really appreciate you. I just want to make sure that y'all all understand the process of how you'll receive updates. The Bethlehem Center is graciously sending out the emails for this class, and they've created a landing page, which you should have the link to in your both your welcome email and your reminder email. And on that landing page, you'll find the Zoom link, and you'll also find, it'll say session 1 poems, and you can click on that, and it'll be all the poems for this week. And then on Friday, we will post the poems for next week, and we'll also post a link, a YouTube link to the recording of this class. So if you're excited and anxious about what's happening next week, just be a little bit patient with us and look for that information on Friday. And you can always refer back to that landing page. That landing page will disappear after the class is over, but we will send out a summary to everyone at the end. And I believe that's all I need to say. So I will now turn it over to Jay McDaniel, who is our facilitator for the day.
Well, hello, everybody. It's so good to see you, and really glad you're here. And I'm glad to be co-teaching this with friends and poets. I see that Mary Elizabeth Moore is here with us now, and Kathleen and Patricia. I may be forgetting someone. Sorry if I am. I majored in English literature when I was in college, but minored in philosophy. And I always thought maybe I'd made a mistake. because I was so interested in abstract principles and general ideas. But over the years, things really changed for me. And I began to find meaning in the concrete images and movements of poems that seemed, in a funny way, more concrete, closer to reality, whatever that is, than the abstract principles. I learned about a whole lot of poetry, and when I was choosing poems for us today, I was tempted to choose some really difficult poems that would be very dense, which I love, that are very hard to understand, which I love. But I chose not to. I chose to choose what, generally speaking, are called lyric poems, short, 15, 17 lines, that are really very clear, but that kind of cut to the chase of what we can be about as people. So I have 4 poems, and I'll try to pace things so that we can talk about each one. Forgive me if I move us along too rapidly. I hope to find the right rhythm for this. We'll start with a poem that I've known for a long, long time, and I had read at my retirement ceremony, because it kind of named what I want to be about all of my life. And it's finding scraps of light in daily life and letting them be nourishment to help heal a broken world. So here's the poem. It's by Deborah Cooper, and it goes like this. I see the way the chickadees take turns at the feeder. I watch a neighbor take her husband's hand. I see the way the sun will find the only interruption in dark clouds to toss this amber light across the pines. I see a row of cars stop on the road until the orange cat has safely crossed, then take off slowly, should she change her mind. I watch the way my brother lifts our mother from the wheelchair to the car, the shawl he lays across her lap. I save up every scrap of light because I know that it will take each tiny consolation every day to mend the world. So that's the poem, and take a look at the images, or listen to them. The chickadees taking turns at the feeder, watching my neighbor take her husband's hand, the way the sun will fill the only interruption in dark clouds to toss its light across the pines, a row of cars stopping on a road until an orange cat has safely crossed, then take off slowly should she change her mind. The way my brother lifts our mother from the wheelchair to the car, the shawl he lays across her lap. Okay, Patricia, back to gallery view. So all of those are images from daily life. And I thought I might ask you some questions just to get us started. And I've put them in chat, but I'll name them. Are there particular images in the poem that are especially meaningful to you? And if you were to add to the poem, are there scraps of light from daily life that you would like to live up? You can imagine the poem is continuing, and you add your own images. To what extent is daily life itself a primary source of revelation for you? The place you go to find consolation and healing and direction. What does it mean to save up scraps of light? Not simply to notice them, but to save them, to collect them. The title of the poem is Collecting Light. What is the light that is contained in the scraps? What is it? Is it God? Is it beauty? Is it goodness? Is it love? Does it need a name? And really, what's the purpose of saving up scraps of light? They're beautiful in their own right, and they provide consolation. But the poem tells us that in a way, they're also a means to the end, an end, that our calling, our task as human beings is to help mend the world, is to help mend the world. So saving up scraps is in service to that. Now, Kathleen, if you would give, or I think I can get the whole gallery view, would anybody like to add a comment or take up any of those questions? Any of them? What images leapt up at you in that poem? We'll start there. Nita Gilger, how about for you?
Hi there. Hi, Jay.
Hey,
I guess because I've been doing so much congregational pastoral care, the wheelchair image really leapt out at me. This absolute tenderness of that. That not a situation that could be fixed, but one that could be cared for, and one that could be given light and love in healing ways. So that leapt up out at me.
Nita, would you call that a scrap of light?
Absolutely.
Would that be your language?
Yes, absolutely. And another one a line that I would add would be I was walking down the hallway the other day, and the children were letting out of school, and one little girl, their volume is very high. They don't have volume control when they're little. And she points at me and she says to her mother, "I think that's a grandma." And her mother said, "Shh," because I think she thought I might be offended with my gray hair that I was being called old. And I said, "I am a grandma. Thank you for being light for me." That's a scrap of light.
That's interesting too, because that's joyful
Oh, yes.
and kind of funny, just funny. So funny events can be scraps of light too.
Yes.
Tina and then Dan. Tina? And then Doug. Tina, go ahead. If
Tina,
you're
you're muted.
we'll move to Dan, Tina, and then when you get hooked in, we'll call on you. Dan?
Thank you, Jay. What jumped out at me is each one of these rays of light is like the expression of a virtue. And a virtue is one of the qualities of the divine. And so each ray of light is like an expression of the divine that gets expressed through actions of service. And it just ties it together because all those acts of service collectively make for a better world. Thanks.
You're welcome. One of the images, one of them was purely naturalistic. It was the light shining through the trees, through the sun. So it was not so much an act of kindness as per se, but a moment of beauty and hope. Let that symbolize for you and for all of us the way in which the more than human world so often provides scraps of light. Now, I'm kind of waiting for somebody to mention the cat, but nobody's done so yet. Does anybody want to? Marianne and Kathleen.
I thought the cat example was touching because it is slowing technology down to stop for life And, you know, cars are huge and always rushing. And here, oh, we have to stop and be in the moment for this cat. And I'm very
And slow down in case the cat changes her mind and recrosses the road.
So it's kind of then also the unity of intention when people see that.
Mm,
Uh-huh.
mhm.
Now, I'm going to ask 3 more people, Kathleen and Tina and Christine, to make a comment, and then forgive me if we move on after that to the next poem. Remember, we have 4. If we can do it, we'll see. Kathleen, go ahead.
I'll just be very quick. One of the things that really touched me in this poem was the extra layer of tenderness added on to an already attentive and tender act. It was the cars not just stopping, but waiting to see if the cat was going to take off again. It was that was an extra thing, taking off slowly in case she would change her mind. And I felt the same way about the wheelchair. My mother was in a wheelchair. It was not just the way he lifted her, but the shawl that he played. It was so beautiful.
Tina and Christine. Thanks, Kathleen. Tina.
The wheelchair image was very vivid to me because I had a brother who lived 20 years out of his 25 in a wheelchair, and he was such a delightful person, and his wonderful spirit was always a scrap of light for me. And the shawl reminds me of our prayer shawl ministry at St. Mark's Episcopal Church, where women and men knit wonderful and beautiful shawls for either hospitalized or homebound parishioners. And it's a wonderful, wonderful ministry. And they attempt with each knitting stitch to pray for the person that they're making the shawl for.
That's great, Tina. And the palpability of the shawl. You know, you can touch shawls. They're fabric. You don't just see them, you touch them. Christine.
Hi. The image again of my brother lifting my mother from the wheelchair. Before my mom died, she was in a care home in the same town as my brother, and how lovingly he saw her every day and talked to her, and he was there when she passed away. And I had a really hard time relating to my mom at the time because she had dementia. She was not a nice person. I really had trouble with being with her. But yet my brother didn't. And he could love her as she was at that time. And that was so, I was just so grateful for him being able to do that.
And we're going to have a poem about that, about dementia, after the next one.
Yeah.
Jay,
So thanks so much.
there was one more comment from Jules that she loved the wheelchair and shawl moment too. And I'll just say for me, so many of these images are about presence and how much light is in our world anytime we stop and we're present. My grandmother, when she was old and having memory issues, we drove down the road and she looked at a sea of green trees like what your backdrop is, Jay. And I just remember her saying, there's so many colors of green. And every moment of the world can be that way if we're just fully present. So.
And thank you, Patricia. And Doug, I remember you had your hand up too. You want to say something real quickly? Then I promise we'll move on. You're muted, Doug.
In Tallahassee, it wouldn't be cats, it would be geese, but we constantly have stops because of the geese crossing the road. But in any event, what struck me was how small each of these actions were. That we don't find God in the big things. And I think Jesus' life demonstrates that. I don't think the things that he did were big, or many of them weren't big expansive, society changing things, but they were small. And I guess that's where I found God in this poem is the fact that everyday activities that usually we may not even think about uh, are important
Yes.
and show God.
I just want to mention process theology one time, maybe more, we'll see. But process theology and philosophy think that the very building blocks of the universe are moments. Moments. And so the attention to the small and the momentary is an attention to something quite fundamental, quite fundamental. With that, let's turn to the next poem. This next poem, called Red Brocade, is by Naomi Shihab, and she is a friend of mine. And she's also Palestinian. And I love the poem. And it's especially meaningful to me in this time. The Arabs used to say, when a stranger appears at your door, feed him for 3 days before asking who he is, where he's come from, where he's headed. That way he'll have strength enough to answer, or by then you'll be such good friends you don't care. Let's go back to that. Rice? Pine nuts? Here, take the red brocade pillow. My child will serve water to your horse. No, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone put on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. I refuse to be claimed. Your plate is waiting. We will snip fresh mint into your tea. So among other phrases there, I'd like to focus in on, no, I was not busy when you came. I was not preparing to be busy. That's the armor everyone put on to pretend they had a purpose in the world. Okay, Patricia, back to the gallery view. And here are some questions that I thought of. Do you yourself ever carry an armor of, I meant to say busyness, as protection? Protection from what? Who or what claims the narrator in the poem? Or you, or me? Does the armor ever drop away of its own accord from encounters with guests or with strangers? When I was a bit younger, and I'm going to laugh at, I'm going to look at Mary Elizabeth here because we have a common teacher, John Cobb. And I remember when I was in seminary, I so admired him and still do. And he always walked very fast. Wherever he was going, he was kind of in a hurry to get there. And I remember thinking to myself, oh, I see. That's a sign of success, of greatness. It's being really busy, having lots of important things to do. And this poem challenges that. This poem, I don't like the word success, but I'll use it. This word suggests that success is actually taking off the armor of busyness and being present in a loving way to strangers, to guests. So, do any of you ever wrestle with the armor of busyness? Even compulsive busyness. And maybe does it ever tempt you to think this makes me important? I think Naomi is challenging that in a very serious way. Anybody want to comment or add a thought to that? That's just my read of it.
Rachel has her hand up.
Rachel, yes.
So you know, when I think of that busyness or kind of hiding almost behind busyness, it makes me think of the passage, you know, in Scripture where Mary and Martha are, and you know, Martha's just so busy, and Mary comes to sit, to be with. And I think that sometimes for myself, I found that as a struggle sometimes. And I've really in recent years recognized that and had to tell myself that being busy for my family wasn't always what they needed. Doing for them, just being with them, was as important as the things that I was doing for them, or inviting them to do those things with me, so that it wasn't just me being busy and them not being a part of me and me not being a part of them.
Thanks, Rachel. Brian.
I spent 3.5 years in Saudi Arabia, and one of the first things I noticed was the greeting ritual. In the West, we ask people, what do you do? What's your job? In the Arab world, the question is, how are you and I related? Who do you know that I know? And so that's a shift away from the busyness in the Arab world. So it's a bit of a strain to wait 3 days before you can ask somebody how you're related. And yet that's the opening of hospitality, which knowing how you're related is very important to a desert people who have to rely on each other for life or death.
Thank you, Brian. Anybody else? Sophia, do you have a thought?
Well, I have lots of thoughts, David. I wasn't planning to share them. Well, the poem brings a lot of memories to me from childhood, when we were being educated and trained about who we are and how we do things as Muslims. It, I think, comes right. I have not read this part of scripture or tradition for a long time, but I think it comes right out of that piece of scripture in Islam when God tells you that whoever believes in God and the last day, present your best hospitality to your guest for at least 3 days. I think that's where it's coming from. But anyways, it brings me so many memories, because when we were growing up, we were taught that, you know, for the first 3 days, we give our best to the guests, and we always started by serving them tea, and that was the job of the kids in the home. So the last sentence in the poem, which says, "We will snip fresh mint into your tea," reminds me of me and my brothers serving tea to our guests when they came as young kids. But it also is a very good reminder about hospitality. In our tradition, hospitality is a triangular relationship between the host and the guest and God. It's an act of devotion towards God, because being a host to somebody allows us to practice all those qualities of heart and mind that we want to practice or that we need to do in order to be a good human being, like generosity and openness and kindness and forgiveness and compassion. So, hospitality is immensely important in our tradition. And it was much easier when I was living in Pakistan, the eastern part of the world, because it's just easier to be a host when you have a lot of help in the household. Life is much different in the Western cultures. You don't expect guests to just pop in anytime or give you a 2-day notice that somebody's coming to come and live with you for 7 days, or it's rare, but it still happens here, at least among friends and family. Not even 7 days, it could be 7 weeks too. And sometimes it's hard. And I have seen myself grow into this attitude that, oh, the household is different, the way houses are made is different, your privacy is disturbed, that we get annoyed when guests are coming, especially coming to stay over at your place. And then it takes me back to the tradition when we are also told in another piece of scripture that guests bring barakah in your home, or when you have guests, it's a source of blessing when you feed your guests and keep them at your home. So I keep on telling my children who are raised in America with a very different cultural context that it's okay to have people come into your house and stay over without giving you a big notice, because they're bringing blessings to your house.
Mm.
So anyways, the poem was such a intense reminder of how we grew up in Pakistan, and how our parents taught us to be very, very generous hosts to the guests who come unannounced, and serve them tea and don't ask them anything for 3 days. And after that, you actually really don't need to ask anything because you know everything. Anyways, these are my thoughts.
Oh, that's so beautiful. Thank you, Sophia. Mary Elizabeth.
You muted.
You're muted.
Sorry, do we have time? Because I think Sophia's comment was a great place to end.
Well, go ahead. I think we're curious. Go ahead.
The line that you asked us about, Jay, was the one that really struck me dumb, because I try my best not to look busy, but I am too busy. And I'm aware that in my own life, the antidote for that is to visit our memory house every week and spend time with people there who whose memories have faded considerably, and to visit a friend who's in the hospital or in some other form of care. And I realize that those are life-giving. And yet, even when I stop on the street in our intentional community, which I do every time I go out because you can't help it, because people stop and have something to say, that is very nourishing. But those are things that happen outside my home. And what strikes me in this poem is the enormous generosity when a stranger appears at your door. This is a stranger coming to your door and into your space. You haven't opted for this. And then the generosity of the gifts, the red brocade pillow, and the little extras, the mint and the tea. It's overwhelming and beautiful.
Well, I agree. And I encourage all of you, if you don't know Naomi Shihab Nye's poems, look them up. She's such a gift. One last thing about this poem. I know that when I read, I'm like Mary Elizabeth. I'm too busy. And I used to want to appear that way, but now I don't want to appear that way. But still I am. And it made me wonder, when I read the poem, I thought, okay, how to take the armor of busyness off. But it does occur to me that sometimes the armor is removed of its own accord by somebody else, by the gift of somebody else's presence. Whatever it is, the armor drops away and they remove the armor. So Mary Elizabeth, hypothetically, that would be in a memory care unit.
Mhm.
So you're visiting with someone. You don't really take the armor off. It's removed by the presence of that person.
Yes.
It's removed. Well, while we're on this subject, let's go to the next poem. There we go. This is by Laura Van Prooyen. She lives in San Antonio, Texas. And it's called Elegy for My Mother's Mind. And it's on her mother with early Alzheimer's. When I steady your step on the stairs, you ask not once but twice where we're going, to the car, to the store. Mom, remember? You laugh and say you thought we'd be walking, and we are, right into the part of your brain where you'll lose me. Lose the child who picked all 43 tulips you waited a solid Chicago winter to watch bloom. Lose the girl who pedaled her Schwinn up and back the U-shaped driveway while you fried bacon behind the evergreens in an electric pan so the house wouldn't smell. We're walking into your head where it's just beginning to snow. And no matter how quickly I shovel, the path will go blank. But this night, grackles above us blacken the tree, and you hold on to me as you get into the car. Together we go to the store where you try on every clearance marked blouse and buy nothing. You're forgetting sadness too. That pool where you used to swim with an armload of bricks, where no slow tug of a rope could pull you from the bottom. You're forgetting about anyone but you. When before dawn on the piano, you pound great balls of fire in the old rugged cross and whistle in searing vibrato. You buy dollar store Kleenex to give as gifts. You pour beans into wine bottles. You lift my chin and say, I'm so glad you were born. Then your pupils widen and tunnel back to a time before I was here, before my brothers or sister, before you lost your father, a time of buses and rain, of radio static, and for a minute, you're far from me. So I take your hand, and it trembles with all you know. Okay, we can go to gallery now. It's a beautiful poem with so many images. And maybe like you, or like I myself have many, many loved ones with Alzheimer's. So I know, maybe you do too, what it's like to be in the presence of someone where there's snow in the mind at some level. There's snow. And as much as you might want to shovel a path to clear away, it keeps snowing. But this is not just a sad poem. It's a complex poem. So here are my questions. And then I see some hands up and we'll turn to those. What is negative and what is positive in her mother's experience of Alzheimer's from the narrator's perspective? That is, from the perspective of the poet. Does the phrase, it's just beginning to snow, speak to you? What at the end of the poem, what is all that you know in the last line? in your experience, is what is known by people with Alzheimer's? Is this a love poem? Is this a love poem? So those are my questions. Do you have thoughts or things you want to say or a question of your own that would be just as important? Jules?
Hey, I am currently a full-time caregiver for my mom with later stages Alzheimer's. And that poem actually circles back to the first poem of Scraps of Light for me, because one thing that I grab onto on a daily is that her memory is going, but also her sadness is going too.
Yes.
And so that's a way that I've been able to hold on to the light and stay positive, find the blessing within the situation that I deal with all day, every day. And my mom always had just massive depression since I can ever remember. And so to feel that she is the blessing of the disease is that has gone away. She has forgotten how sad. And that helps to feel like I'm getting to know my mom in a different way too. So I'm just accepting her and being with her in the presence of that, and also feeling the innocence, because they say that as they progress, they go to, I'm a sandwich caregiver, so I have young children as well. So, you can see where as my children are developing, my mom's digressing. And so they kind of overlap, and I can feel this innocence within her that I didn't know, because she was my mom, she was this big figure. So it's been a poetic time in itself, but it was interesting to me how finding the first poem into this poem as well really spoke to me.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Jules, on that last question, your experience so corresponds in a way to this poem. Do you feel that your mom knows something in her Alzheimer's? Let me give a background for that. There's a movement afoot called Reimagining Dementia. And it's a network of people around the world, actually, that say we need to reimagine dementia as not simply a tragedy, and not something simply not to mention or hide from. That as painful as dementia can be, the loss, there are also some gains. And people with dementia, they know things. They know things that we might not otherwise, we don't know. So it's a community of equals. No hierarchies. Do you feel like your mom knows things?
Oh yeah. She is, it's interesting because as the disease has progressed, I feel like I said, I'm getting to know her on a different level. And I feel like she's feeling a safety in being a part of herself that she never allowed herself to be before because of insecurities or fears. She was always more of a homebody, never wanted to meet new people. Now she loves to meet new people and go out. And so it feels like almost that she's aware that this connection is good for her, that she's aware of, being able to be in a safe environment with me is really good for her. So she's also basing things on an energetic level now versus a preconceived level. Whereas before, her fear, her thoughts, her old past experiences drove everything. But now it's how she feels and what she feels from other people. And so it's been really interesting to learn my mom on this level and to tap into that, because she's one thing I can tell you about this disease, my husband's grandmother had it as well, is it seems like they never forget God and the presence of God. Yeah. And so that's pretty amazing to always see how that comes back into play and is always a comfort, and always a place that we can rest upon and together, when she starts to feel scared, I can always pray with her and thank you for that. She even understands still the prayer. So yeah, she knows things for sure. Thank you.
And thank you also for that phrase, she feels things at an energetic level, which is different from a recollective level. I need to add that for me, that's also process theology, that we feel the feelings of others as energies. And it's not necessarily combined with recollective knowledge. It's mood. It's mood. So thank you so much. Tina, last comment, then we're going to move to the last poem.
I really, really like the fact that in this poem, the person is forgetting sadness. And then that next sentence, that pool where you used to swim with an armload of bricks where no slug tug of a rope could pull you from the bottom. I totally identify with that because I have been at times chronically depressed, and I've been in counseling and I take medication, and it has really, really helped me. But that image with the armload of bricks and water is very, very powerful.
Yep.
Yep, there's some beautiful notes going on in the chat too. So Jay, I just wanted to note those for you.
If you'd like to share any before we move to the last poem, please do so, Patricia.
Sure, just that often people with dementia use language in non-standard ways that are poetic. And that music reaches deep into the soul of those with dementia like nothing else. It's an energy of love and a higher vibration.
All right. Thanks so much for this sharing. Now we'll turn to the last poem.
Okay.
And this is written by a Jewish poet. Yehuda Amichai. It's very short, at least in the version that I'm sharing. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled, like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. Just that first stanza again, from the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled, like a yard. But doubts and loves, they dig up the world, and a whisper can be heard where we thought there was a ruined house. All right. Do you have a place inside you that seems right, but that grows rigid in the rightness? Is it a hard place? Do you know that flowers cannot grow in that place? And the sense of rightness may itself be an obstacle to truth, to love, to whatever is most important. But the doubts and the loves, they can provide nourishing soil for flowers. or at least whispers of flowers. That's my understanding of the poem, but you may have another feeling for it or complementary to that or whatever. Anybody want to respond to that poem? Dan. Unmute, please.
One marriage therapist helping us deal with conflict asked me, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? There is an intransigence to rightness that relates to what Scott Peck talks about in The Road Less Traveled, where he draws a distinction between truthfulness and honesty. Honesty, the ability to directly and straightforwardly say what you're thinking, feeling, or believing. Truthfulness, the ability to take what you honestly think, feel, and believe, hold it up for examination and ask, is it true? Because it might not be. So Scott Peck urges us to devote ourselves to truthfulness and reach out beyond our honesty. And I think our honesty can sometimes be wrapped in rightness and lose the truth.
Rightness becomes a false god.
Yeah.
It becomes an idol. Doug, did you have a comment to make?
Yes. To me, probably the term right in this poem could easily be substituted with a closed mind, because when I think of someone who's right and absolutely convinced of it, then there's no talking to it. There are some political people, and I won't choose any sides or name any sides, but they're so convinced that they're right that that no flowers can grow in the soil. It's rocky soil, and that's where the death comes from. When you close your mind dies, and that seems to me that what the poem is saying. Maybe not. Sorry.
I think it's interesting to wonder how much fervent religious allegiance, but also fervent political allegiance may be rooted in a desire to be right, such that rightness itself becomes a god. A god. So it's good that this is by a Jewish poet, which has been so powerful in its critique of idolatries, inner and outer. Christine.
I think where this really speaks to me is that being right usually shuts down my creativity. I'm finding if I'm writing poems, I write music, or I make quilts. And when I get it in my mind, what this quilt I'm making is going to look like, it never looks like I thought in my head. And I have to get used to the way it looks now and love it. And then I'll quilt it, and then the whole look changes again. And I have to get used to how it looks and love it. And I've always found when I make some kind of a conclusion in my faith that this is right, then it shuts me down from being open-minded, and it shuts me down from learning new ways of looking at things. It's one thing to listen to the faith and what somebody's learning with the same church I go to, or that gets put in a box. That's why I love watching YouTube and grabbing different teachers from different religions and different faiths, and it always opens up my mind. So being right is kind of an end for me.
An end?
An end to my creativity.
Oh, I see. Now the poem, we don't have much time here, but the poem mentions two things that can nourish that creativity or that growth. And one is doubts, and the other is loves. Does it make sense to you that loves might soften hard ground and free a person from the place that is right?
Jay, in the chat, somebody mentions the Rumi poem, Out Beyond the Field of Right and Wrong.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
That's so interesting. That's so interesting. Well, listen, thanks to everybody for today. I think it's been a good exploration, and that's what we want to happen in these times together. We simply want to explore and let poetry be a springboard for those explorations, and you've done exactly that. So gratitude to you, and have a good week. And Patricia, or Danya, is there anything we need to say and by way of farewell, except see you next time, we hope?
Well,
just a big thank you, Jay. That was beautiful.
See how hospitable they are to one another.
and we'll post the poems for next week and this recording on Friday. And so you can go to that landing page and find all the things for next week.
All right. Blessings to everybody.